On this episode, we are talking about hip mobility. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 97 of the Foundation First Fitness Show with Bob Acko. And today, we are going to be discussing some of the benefits and some exercises that you can start using on a regular basis to drastically, my throat's getting a little congested there, that you can use to drastically improve your performance. Now, before we get into the exercises and the specifics of it and what you should be doing with it, this is something you're probably going to need to see, kind of take part in. So I will be posting a hip mobility OMP Performance Essentials. For those of you who don't know what OMP Performance Essentials are, essential routines that I put together. It's on our webpage. It's on YouTube as well. I'm going to link it up above. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, it's going to be linked in the description as well. Basically, it is a series of routines that I think are drastically important, can make a huge difference in your performance, and things that we almost want all of our clients to be able to do on a regular basis. So you can be able to watch this and kind of follow along with it. You won't need to, memorize and kind of listen to what I'm saying, kind of figure it out from just listening. You're going to be able to go and just kind of practice this stuff on your own. So hip mobility is going to be one of them. We're going to be creating it. So by the time this comes out, it might already be there. So check the description down below, or I'm going to link it above right here. Hip mobility. Actually, you know what? I'll make sure that it comes out. I'll make sure hip mobility comes out before this comes out, so it'll be linked above. Probably already was. It's not. If not, it's going to be in the description. You can go and check that out. But what hip mobility is essentially the ability to get some space and proper space in the hip, meaning can your hip internally rotate, externally rotate? So can you turn your hip in, out? So can you basically take your thigh, the bone in your thigh, and rotate it in and out? Can you bring it up to the side? Can you bring it in front of you? Can you kick it right back? Do you have any restrictions anywhere in there? And mobility is pretty much the same for every single joint. You want to make sure that you maintain an optimal range of mobility. The reason mobility is so important is your body is never going to allow you to just stop functioning because one joint stops functioning optimally. So if you have a weakness somewhere, or if you have a limitation in one joint in your body, ankle, knee, hip, low back, pelvis, shoulder, elbow, whatever, your body will go and get range of motion elsewhere, because it's not just going to stop. You're not just going to be bedridden because you lose hip mobility all of a sudden. It's not going to just you're going to be done. You're going to be lying there forever. No, your body's going to try to adjust, and you're going to compensate to keep going. And that's where the term compensation comes from. Your body's going to adjust and make up kind of the difference elsewhere. The problem is that it really requires a trained eye to see a compensation that isn't extremly obvious. Like if you're struggling to get full hip extension, it's going to be very evident for you to see if it's really, really, really bad. But if it's very minor and it's very mild, you won't be able to see it. You're going to need someone that has a trained eye that's going to be able to put you in a position to kind of expose that limitation. And the reason why this is a huge deal is because, range of motion is directly controlled by, the type of inflammation that's in the joint, if there's any wear in the joint, but also the function of the muscles. So if the right muscles are functioning properly and they're able to control to the proper range, you're going to have proper range of motion in the hips. You're going to have good hip mobility. If you don't, you're going to be struggling with it. And like I said, your body's going to go get other joints to make up the difference. But the problem is that if other joints are making up the difference, that means that other muscles are also starting to pick up the slack, which is why some of us are getting, you'll get knee pain, you'll get low back pain, you'll get ankle pain, you'll get foot pain, you'll get calf pain, you'll get front of your shin pain, that shin splints. A lot of these are all just compensations and poor technique, lack of range, over driving onto one muscle, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to hip mobility, whether you're a runner, whether you're a cyclist, whether you're a hockey player, whether you're a soccer player, golfer, whatever sport you're doing, and not even just sports, this is anyone in general can do this, but I really want to focus on sports here because I think the biggest benefit is for you guys. You're going to notice the biggest difference. For the average population, hip mobility, if there's a limitation in the range, it's very for the majority of tasks we do, and I'm going to put a little asterisk on here. I'm not saying don't ever work on it, don't bother. I'm saying that you probably won't see the benefit until you're really exposing yourself to some difficult tasks. Whereas athletes will notice right away. There'll be a limitation. They'll either hit a glass ceiling in their performance, or they're going to run into pain. They're going to run into performance issues, so on and so forth. So one of the things I've noticed in a lot of athletes, especially when it comes to high performance athletes, is that as they start progressing, so I'm going to get my hand sanitizer out of the picture there. As they start progressing, what ends up happening is they stop putting emphasis on recovery and on clean movement. They start putting so much more attention to actually just practicing the sport. So if you're a runner, I notice a lot of runners will just they will completely neglect foam rolling. They'll completely neglect mobility. It's usually a struggle and a little bit of a battle for me to get my triathletes to really focus on that stuff. Hockey players are a little bit better. My hockey players are a little bit better because it's becoming a trend for them to kind of do it. They'll go into the weight room, they'll do all their stuff in the morning. The team will kind of have, mandatory mobility sessions and foam rolling sessions and so on and so forth. So it's a little easier to get them in on that stuff. But again, a lot of these things take a back seat, where in reality, those are going to be the biggest supporters of performance. I look at any one of my runners, if the first thing I get them to do is improve mobility and control in their hip and their foot, and within 4 or 5 sessions, they notice a drastic improvement, the biggest difference is going to come from there. So that's why I'm telling you that your hip mobility is going to be one of the most important things you can consider. So how to do hip mobility is really understanding the ranges and the areas that it can actually function in. So number 1, leg coming out to the side, coming in, going up and back, pulling your knee in, kicking your leg back, and internal external rotation. So I like to use exercises that are going to combine a couple of these different factors and a couple of these different things together, and then start building a nice system of stretches and basically positions that are going to allow us to really challenge these different areas. And again, you may not have a hip mobility problem, but it could present itself as a hip mobility problem. So there's a little asterisk on the side there as well. You may have something wrong with your foot, and it'll look like you have something wrong with your hip. It's very possible for that to happen. And the reverse can happen. You can also have something wrong with your hip. It'll make it look like you have something wrong with your foot. So be sure that when you're doing these exercises you're going to see in this clip, you want to make sure that you're not doing them aimlessly and just kind of I'm doing them and I'm not really sure if I actually have good range or if I don't have good range. If you're struggling to get these exercises done, usually a sign that you're lacking in hip mobility. If you're flying through these exercises and you're like, oh yeah, I got no problem, but for some reason something keeps going on, I keep landing wrong, my foot keeps turning this, that, the other thing, then it probably is more... it's probably going to be something a little bit lower down, like further down the stream. So I would say it's either downstream or upstream. So it's either going to be your knee or your ankle, probably your ankle and foot, or if it's upstream, it's going to be in your low back because of core issues. So one of the first exercises I love using is a 90-90. So it's basically you sitting on the ground. One leg is an internal rotation, the other one's an external rotation. And what you're doing is from there, you're stretching, you're kind of leaning over your you're leaning over your shin, calves, could have been calf. I could have stuck with calf. Not technically wrong. You're leaning over your shin, stretching, then you're rotating back. You're getting a little bit of you're increasing that internal rotation. You're getting a little bit of a midsection core stretch, and then you're switching and rotating to the complete opposite side. That rotation's allowing you to really teach yourself to fire your core, get into go through rotation in a nice hip flex position. So with the knee up high and then rotating to the other side. Really, really, really important exercise. I love it. It's one of my favorite ones to do. The other one I like to do is a frog. Now, frog, you're more in basically like a crawling bear plank position. Legs are a little wider than you would in a bear plank. But what you're going to do is you're basically just rotating the leg out and back in and out on the other side and back in. Now, you may be wondering, is this really a stretch or am I just moving? The first two are not really like sit and stretch. They're more just moving around. Well, the first is a little bit of both. It's kind of a combination of both. Why is it considered a mobility exercise? Well, it's a good question. Mobility is actually not just stretching. A lot of people consider mobility as just stretching. You just grab your exercise, you get on, you stretch your quads, stretch your hamstrings, that's not what mobility is. Stretching and, movements, dynamic, static, whether you're in movement and you're stretching or static and you're just holding it and stretching, these are components of mobility. They make up mobility. Activation and basically getting the right muscles to activate by getting one muscle to contract is going to cause another muscle to relax, teaching your body the right pattern, trying to actively move and control and generate movement under control through a range of motion. That is contributing to mobility. Mobility is essentially just the ability to control your body through an extended range of motion. I don't know if that's the exact technical term, but that's pretty much what it means. You're basically able to control yourself as you move. You're able to control your part of your body as you move. Now, does that necessarily mean that stretching is going to do it or stretching is not going to do it? No, it could be a flexibility thing. It could be a stretching thing. It could be a dynamic stretching thing. It could be an activation or control thing. I like to think it's the latter. I like to think it is more of a strengthening control thing. I think a lot of the limitations in range of motion are not limitations in range of motion because of flexibility, but really what it is more of just an inability to activate and control through that range, so you lose it altogether. Which is why some of the other exercises I throw in there are something like a hip bridge, where you're bridging up and you're extending your hip, coupled with a hip flexor stretch and a quad stretch. So what you're doing is you're actually stretching the quad and then flipping it over and getting in a nice hip flexor stretch and quad stretch. These are really important for, exercises like if you're a runner, you're gonna need this. If you're a cyclist, you're gonna definitely need this, because a lot of cyclists complain about back pain, and a lot of that is just coming from an inability to get a complete and smooth range of motion, so the body goes and gets it from the low back, and that low back recruitment is going to cause a lot of low back pain. So not only does your bike have to be important and kind of sized up right, but you also have to have proper mobility. And if you want to know a little bit more about sizing and understanding sizing, the importance of it, I'm going to link a little clip up above of a previous episode I did with a bike fitting specialist and a bike store specialist, good friend of mine from in our area and from this neighborhood here in Point Claire. And they do a lot of fittings, precise fittings, and he talks a bit about it. And I've seen him at work, and we do a lot of work with him as well. So we've seen this stuff in action and we can see the benefits of it. But getting back to the hip mobility, making sure that if you're going through these exercises, they're being done on a regular basis. And I mean a daily basis, because there is a high chance that if you're struggling with hip mobility, it's because something that you're doing throughout your day or in your activity is causing that problem, is causing that lack of hip mobility, or causing that limitation of that joint. So you want to make sure that you're doing it just as often. So you want to make sure that if you're doing something wrong every day, you may not notice. It might be the way you're sitting, might be the way you're walking, might be the shoes that you're in. There's so many things that could be affecting this. And you want to make sure that if you're doing these things on a daily basis that you might not know you're doing, you want to be very sure that you're doing the right things on the other side, because you'll start cleaning up that movement. If it's a movement pattern, you might help your posture. If it's a postural problem when you're sitting, and all of these things are going to contribute to an improved. They're going to kind of compile and kind of pack on each other, and they're going to be much better for you. You're going to notice a much bigger difference. So I would definitely get on that and think about that kind of stuff. Make it a daily habit. Now, what if your hip mobility is good? What if you do this entire routine and you're like, my hip mobility is fine. It's not that big of a deal. I still recommend you do it. Maybe not do it as religiously, where it's if you miss a day, it's oh my God, I can't believe I missed a day. Maybe you kind of stick to it on workout days where you're actually going to go and do an entire workout, or maybe you just do it at 50% volume, where you just do a couple, switch to the next exercise, do a couple, switch to the next exercise, do a couple, and so on. That way you're kind of making sure you're keeping yourself honest, right? You're making sure that you're not allowing these problems to kind of occur. Like I said, you don't know when these things are going to be caused. You usually I've honestly never had a client who's come and been like, yeah, hey, my hip's been bugging me, and I know it's because when I sit like this, and I know it's because of my chair, because when I sit like that and I do this and I sit a certain way, and I've never had a client come in and do that. So usually they are not even aware that they're doing it, because it's for them, it's just everyday stuff. Oh, you're running like this, or they don't know that their heels touching on the outside versus the inside. there's so many things that are happening that are really, that kind of fly under the radar that we just don't notice. So I would tell you do it nonetheless, because you always want to keep yourself honest and kind of do a nice clean sweep of everything. And it's honestly just good activation practices. You're just allowing your body to activate itself properly for the exercise, for the routine, for the workout. You're just getting your body warmed up. You're getting the joint capsule warmed up. You're getting the muscles that you're going to need warmed up and ready to go and activated. So it's really just a good habit to have, which is why I'm saying do it at the very least, do it on training days, activity days, practice days, whatever it is. Those are the days I think you're going to be best suited to do them. And I would highly recommend you pay very close attention to the technique, because the technique is really important in them. If you guys have any questions about hip mobility at different joints and stuff like that, if there's something you really want to see, drop a little something in the comment. And question of the day is, when was the last time you yourself did a mobility day? Was it a day ago, 2 days ago? Was it a week ago? If it's been over a week, it's something you want to maybe pay attention to and get on, because you will start seeing a big difference in your performance when you're controlling your mobility and your ability to move well. Your ability to move well, your ability to move gets a lot better. You're going to see that performance increase. Okay. Thanks a lot for listening. Have yourselves a great rest of your day. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I will talk to you later. Listening to this on YouTube, I'll see you guys later. And until that next time, keep building that foundation. Super pumped to get to 100 episodes. Really excited. I have a special guest lined up for that, waiting for this kind of quarantine to maybe die off, see if it can. If it can't, then we're going to try to do it via Zoom, but I'm super excited for that. Take care, guys. Have a good day.